Taking you to the source of the story as we cross over to a journalist based in Beirut.
هذه اللحظة في الانفجار الذي وقع.
Beirut is central, it's like Lusaka. So the distance is more than 91 km and people could hear the explosion.
The suspected PF cadre was beaten and arrested.
To me, news means serving the public. And when I say serving the public, I mean giving them information that is not only true, but factual.
To me, news is God sent. I like to see the less privileged being helped as a result of the work that I do.
Growing up, I didn't have many chances to have my voice heard. But now news gives me an opportunity to give people a voice.
News to me means that I'm a bridge between what makes the news and those affected by it.
For me, news is accurate and factual information that gives the general public power to make informed decisions on things that matters to them.
News to me means bringing information to the people so that they have the access to the information in order for them to know their rights.
For me, news is a privilege. It allows me to be a source of information to the public.
The news reminds us of the past and guides us to the future, all the while outlaying the present.
News to me is current affairs. It is truth, is everything accurate and everything that the public may regard as of interest to them.
From Kabul, Afghanistan, S24 takes you to the source of the controversial Taliban prisoner pardons with me, Hujjatullah Zia.
Unlike popular belief, gender-based violence occurs in both males and females. GBV standing for Chan.
GBV
gender-based violence.
Gender what? Violence, whatever.
GBV standing for it's maybe I can say maybe
kama pari abantu bamwe
okay, it's kind of that violence in our home.
Yabo ya change always.
Depends on the case. Depend on the case. Ufuna chose mainsoliti ya manja hapa usekesa abantu pachana.
Know what your week needs?
Welcome to At The Source, the show where we break down all of those trending topics and headlines.
I'm curious, please go on. Your local news stories, your international news stories, your regional news stories. We're giving you the opportunity to have your comment. This is not a time in the current situation in our country, in the world, where you can use phrases like, I don't do politics.
We're going to see mysterious 48 houses. And then we will just say, oh, because it's African tradition, we cannot question our leaders, they are our parents, so whatever they're doing is okay.
What does that entail as a brand ambassador for a university?
Politicians are not afraid of riots, fortunately. They're afraid of the ballot box.
You dance? What else do you do?
We hug and kiss and wah. But join the conversation with Talu and Amina on At The Source every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 3 p.m. All right, so
handsome tigers.
Know what your week needs?
Welcome to At the Source, the show where we break down all of those trending topics and headlines. I'm curious. Please go on. Your local news stories, your international news stories, your regional news stories. We're giving you the opportunity to have your comments. This is not a time in the current situation in our country, in the world, where you can use phrases like, I don't do politics.
We're going to see mysterious 48 houses. And then we will just say, oh, because it's African in tradition, we cannot question our leaders, they are our parents, so whatever they're doing is okay.
What does that entail as a brand ambassador for a university?
Politicians are not afraid of riots, fortunately. They're afraid of the ballot box.
You dance? What else do you do?
We hug and kiss and wah. But
Join the conversation with Talu and Amina on At the Source every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 3 p.m.
all right, so
Handsome tigers.
Unlike popular belief, gender-based violence occurs in both males and females. Unlike GBV standing for Chan.
GBV,
Gender-based currency.
gender what? Violence, whatever.
GBV standing for it's maybe I can say maybe
Ikamba pari abantu bamnewa ma.
Okay, it's kind of that violence in our home. The boy I change, how is it? Depends on the case, Depends on the case. Ufuna chose mainso. Ufuna chose mainso litia manja hapa usekesa abantu pachana.
Know what your week needs?
welcome to At the Source, the show where we break down all of those trending topics and headlines. I'm curious. Please go on. Your local news stories, your international news stories, your regional news stories. We're giving you the opportunity to have your comments. This is not a time in the current situation in our country, in the world, where you can use phrases like, I don't do politics.
We're going to see mysterious 48 houses. And then we will just say, oh, because it's African in tradition, we cannot question our leaders, they are our parents, so whatever they're doing is okay.
What does that entail as a brand ambassador for a university?
Politicians are not afraid of riots, fortunately. They're afraid of the ballot box.
You dance? What else do you do?
We hug and kiss and wah. But
Join the conversation with Talu and Amina on At the Source every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 3 p.m.
all right, so
Handsome tigers.
From Lusaka, Zambia, this is S24 News.
Good evening. This is S24, your first and only Zambian 24-hour news channel that continues to be at the source of your story. My name is Tala Mukupa, and these are your evening headlines. Zambia is better than it was, says President Lungu. Global COVID response and way forward. Alcohol enthusiasts dancing to partial reopening of bars. Petrol-bombed families struggling to quench 2 fires. And in sports, OIDC Open under strict measures. And now for your news in detail. President Edgar Lungu this morning officially opened the 5th session of the 12th National Assembly. The head of state made a number of directives, among them the reopening of all schools and drinking places under the new normal and following health guidelines. The head of state further mentioned that despite the challenges the country has continued to face, the PF government will continue to work hard in achieving its promises to the people of Zambia.
We promised the Zambian people a better Zambia, and today Zambia is better than we found it. We will continue to change the face of our country. We will continue to deliver on our promises for a better Zambia. With dedication and hard work, Mr. Speaker, we will get there. With God on our side, all things are possible. Mr. Speaker, dedication, resilience, and innovation must be our developmental agenda while pursuing economic recovery for the Zambia we want against the backdrop of the COVID-19 pandemic, while continuing to live in the new normal. Mr. Speaker, I now wish to declare the 5th session of the 12th National Assembly officially opened. God bless you all. God bless our great nation, Zambia.
We have Young African Leaders Association legal advisor Isaac Mwanza on the line to give us his association's views on the presidential address given earlier today. Good evening, Mr. Mwanza. Hello, Mr. Mwanza, can you hear me? I can't seem to hear you.
Yes, I can hear you.
Wonderful.
Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening. So what do you make of the presidential speech delivered this morning?
Yeah, first, I want to say that that was a very good speech by the Republican president. The theme itself was very befitting. We are just coming out, actually, we are still in the pandemic, the COVID pandemic period. And a lot of businesses have been affected, a lot of lives have been affected. Almost everything has come to a standstill, as stated by the president. Our economy itself, it was very clear that we are getting into a negative 4.2 growth rate, which is what is almost obtaining at the global level at 4.9. Now, if you look at the three key areas in his theme towards economic recovery, he talked about dedication, he talked about innovation, he talked about resilience. Those three themes captured everything in his whole speech. And it translated so well when he began to break down on how this country has fared in the last few years. For instance, from 2016 to 2017, the country has seen unprecedented infrastructure development, which is quite good. And I think that the people appreciate it. The only thing that the people are worried about is that, look, the kwacha is going up compared to the dollar. The economy is not very stable, and the people are looking forward to those solutions.
Mr. Mwanza, just to catch you there, to better understand, following what you're saying, would you say that the head of state's speech brought more hope than doubt to the Zambian people?
I think it brought more hope than doubt. Of course, you don't expect that everybody is going to like the presidential speech. But at the end of the day, I think that he tried to inspire hope. He tried to tell the nation to say, even with this pandemic that we have, even with the current economic challenges that we have, we as a people can emerge out victorious. We can emerge out winning. This is what the Zambian people have been looking forward to from their leaders, to hear from their leaders, so that they can get the hope to say, there is tomorrow, we might get better. So in my view, the speech of the president was very, very inspiring. It was giving us hope. People had lost hope. They were looking forward to hearing from the president time and again to speak and give these policy directions and say, where are we and where are we going? And this is exactly what the president delivered today.
All right. So what would you say your main takeaway point was from the speech?
Yes, the main takeaway point from the speech is that One, when we are going to be looking at the economy itself, everybody else needs to get involved into trying to propel our economy to a better growth. For instance, what are we doing to get involved into agriculture? Okay, the president was calling on everybody else to say, we can do it. We can all venture into some form of agriculture. We can venture into different sectors and get value for what we are doing. When he talked about the issues such as the fight against corruption, I think he was very decisive today. He was very clear. Nobody is going to be spared when it comes to the fight against corruption. The president was preaching that we need to have prudence in the way we spend our resources. There are a lot of contracts that are inflated, and he was calling the nation to take interest into it, to say, can we take interest into the procurement of our goods and services so that we do not inflate these costs?
All right. Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Mwanza. Have a good evening.
Well, thank you. Good evening.
Now, Bars and Nightclub Owners Association have received the partial reopening of drive-in places with dance and jubilation, but have cautioned patrons on the importance of maintaining health guidelines against the coronavirus pandemic. Association President Edmond Lifwekelo says the partial reopening of bars will alleviate the suffering of close to 50,000 of his members, and Tito Kalama filed this report.
I therefore wish to announce the partial reopening of these outlets from Fridays to Sundays with immediate effect. But of course, with serious caution that all public health guidelines are strictly adhered to. These outlets shall operate from 18 hours to 23 hours. This is being done on a pilot basis. Should there be any flouting of the public health regulations and guidelines, I will be left with no option but to close them again.
For 6 long months, bars, taverns, and nightclub owners had to wait for their businesses to be reopened as a result of the invisible enemy, the coronavirus pandemic. They resorted to using all manner of tactics to operate and were often in conflict with the law. Bars and Nightclub Owners Association has welcomed the partial reopening of drinking places with a dance.
It has actually uplifted their spirits right now. It has given them hope. You know, schools are opening, and you know, most of them actually were even wondering how they were going to take back the children to school.
However, Mr. Lifwekelo has a caution for patrons and business owners.
People to our members who say, if you relax, then we risk being closed again by the president, because he was quite very categorical. He said, you want a state? So it's the onus on us that we shouldn't allow rowdy people. We should play our music at a minimum volume. We don't want people to be dancing. We don't want people to be kissing. We don't want people to be hugging.
It is yet to be seen where the bar owners and their patrons will be able to follow health guidelines. Tito Kalama, S24.
Stay tuned. Yoela Chomba will be back on the business desk after this break.
Voting is the act of choosing someone or something in an election, and in this particular case, a political candidate. In a democratic country like Zambia, voting is essential. What that means is that we all have the power to choose freely who will rule our country and who will not. Given that choice, it is imperative for us to make informed decisions, because what we decide, we have to live with.
Please, no!
The voting process is quite easy to understand, so let's get right into it. After registering as a voter and collecting your voter's card, you will have to wait until the polling day to cast your vote. In this time of waiting, you can take time to get more acquainted with the aspiring candidates so that you're able to make an informed decision come polling day. On polling day, when you get to the polling station, you will undergo screening. This is done to make sure that the people voting are eligible voters. The polling officers will check your NRC and voter's card. They will also do a security check just to ensure that you only have what you need at the voting booth. So before you get to the voting booth, you will be given your ballot papers listing the candidates you can vote for, and you will proceed to the voting booth. Always ensure you read the instructions carefully in order to not make any mistakes. Thereafter, complete your ballot paper by selecting your preferred candidate. Do not for any reason write anything else on your ballot paper, as this may nullify your vote. Your thumbnail will be inked with a semi-permanent dye just so you cannot be allowed to vote again anywhere else other than the place you voted. Right after the voting is done and the polling station is closed, the ballot papers are all screened to make sure they've been filled in correctly. The ones that are not are set aside as rejected ballots and do not count as votes. This is why it is important to follow all the instructions and fill in your ballot paper carefully. As the ballots are counted, a report is given for each district and province. After all the results are compiled, the returning officer then gives a comprehensive report for the nation, revealing the victor for that election. The victorious runner for that election is then sworn in and named president. Each one of us gets one vote. Let's make it count.
The President gave his State of the Nation address as he officially opened the 5th session of the 12th National Assembly today. On a social front, it seems the speech has had an immediate impact, with some of you having declared as the best news so far this week. However, on the monetary and fiscal front, will that speech have an impact? We'll find out in today's Money Watch. Good evening and welcome to Business News. My name is Yoel Achomba. Now, to see if the President's address will have an impact on the monetary and fiscal side, Mutisunge Zulu, the Chief Macro Strategist at the Kwacha Arbitrager, a unit for the Business Telegraph, will help highlight some of the major points in the President's speech. Good evening, Mutisunge.
Good evening, Yoela. Thanks for having me on Spring TV.
Yes.
2014.
Right. Before we bring out some highlights of the speech today, the theme of the address is dedication, resilience, and innovation, pursuing economic recovery for the Zambia we want. What do you think of this theme, and do you think it does outline a direction that can give confidence not only to the general public, but the country's stakeholders?
Thank you for that question, Yoela. It's not the easiest of questions to answer, but I'll tell you that, yes, I mean, the head of state is like the chief executive of this country, and he's set out the tone. So, yes, you can talk about resilience, you can talk about diversification, dedication, and the like, but I think the biggest challenge will now be actualization of whatever he has said. How will those initiatives be funded is a very, very key strategic point. So the CEO always spells out the strategy, and what the president did was he spelled out the strategy and what we should expect this year to the end of the year and next year. So what the world is waiting for is funding, and funding takes us to what we should expect in the budget 2 weeks from now, because that would then spell where the money will come.
Yeah, and that actually brings me to the next question, Mutsungi. What impact do you anticipate this speech will have on the country's cooperating partners, or is it too early to judge? Is a speech enough for others would rather wait for, I mean, you've just said that they'd rather wait for the national budget in a fortnight's time?
Well, it's actually good that the president has set out the tone. That's the strategy that he has set at the opening of Parliament. And we have very interesting cooperating partners right now who are more interested in fiscal consolidation rather than funding of projects and how this would be done. I think what is very key is before COVID, we had balance sheet vulnerabilities and we had not yet closed an IMF program. So some of the key cooperating partners are the IMF themselves, the World Bank, and people that we are asking for debt reprieve. So they're all watching. Maybe that's the reason why we haven't even been given a rapid credit facility, because people want to know what direction we are taking next year. So it's okay to recede this year, because almost every other country will recede, with the only country being China that will grow in the positives. But next year, we're talking a rebound. How will this rebound be achieved? How will it be funded? It must be clear, because one thing that the president brings out is, yes, it's true that COVID has affected the private sector. Their cash flows are affected. And if cash flows for the private sector are affected, then it means that their taxes will also be affected. They will not be able to pay taxes as they would have if they had made significant profits. So the question is, how will this budget be funded? I mean, that's what cooperating partners are looking for. I was speaking to some strategists earlier that were asking to say, but how come we didn't hear anything on funding and the IMF and the like? But then I answered to say, I think it would be very unfair to lump it on the president to start explaining IMF issues when he has a technocrat, the Minister of Finance, that's supposed to be very, very clear. We have a significant portion of debt. I think we have, I expect about over 1.5 billion to be budgeted for towards debt, and debt takes up a significant portion, Noella. So these are some of the things that the guys are waiting to hear in 2 weeks' time.
Yeah. Now, the president has asked us Zambians to attune our mindset to building a Zambia that is resilient to shocks, a Zambia that is open to new ideas and opportunities, a Zambia that is looking inwards for local solutions. How achievable is this? What do you think is step one in order for us to move into this direction?
Okay, so you see, Yoela, that's a very good initiative. We've been preaching localization, self-sustenance for a very long time. But let's not also forget that we are at a point where we're in a very, very tight spot, and we do need that kind of assistance. I think what disease pandemics sometimes can do, it makes you think like you are all in the same bracket. But remember, COVID is going to go away, and the same issues that we had before COVID will still be there. So that form of assistance in terms of an IMF package, in terms of debt deferment, in terms of, we have a debt restructure that is going on. So much as, yes, we can talk about localization and boosting our own local, it's a good thing. But remember, for people to get to that level, they will also need things like funding. You have an exchange rate that has run away, it's not good for business. Interest rates are still high. Access to credit is very difficult. So even if you talk about localization, the question is, how will people get funding to even take up positions in business and be able to influence growth? So these are some of the things that we can do in parallel, but let's not forget that this could be twofold. If we ignore making steps towards fiscal fitness, we might as well forget about assistance, but it will be a painful process. It will take longer for us to be sustained. But then if we accept acceptance, that will be then faster, because then the environment will ease. You will get debt reprieve. You will have more resources that you can then allocate to the local sector that you are talking about to grow this economy indigenously. So we are at a very, very tricky spot, Yoela, and it's just what it is.
Right. It seems everything is pointing to the national budget, Mutsunge. But thank you for coming through, and do have a great weekend.
Thank you, Yoela. Thanks for having me on Spiritual.
All right.
Thanks.
Now, residents of Lusaka's County Township are optimistic over the president's announcement about the end of load shedding by the end of the year 2020, after he commissions the 750 Kafue Gorge Lower Power Station. Esnat Lungu is at the source of your story.
Republican President Edgar Lungu said earlier today that he is happy to report that load shedding shall be a thing of the past once he commissions the 750 megawatts Kafue Gorge Lower Power Station and the Chunga Solar Power Project in Kafue National Park. He says the two projects are expected to cover the 810 megawatts power deficit that the country currently has. We spoke to a few residents in Lusaka's County Township about the announcement, and here is what we found.
Most of the people don't know that load shedding has affected us badly, because like here where I am, where I operate from Kaunda Market, we have long hours of load shedding. You may power may go maybe around 6 in the morning and it will come back around 19 hours. Definitely, you won't expect somebody to work during the night, because even working during the night, it's not healthy. It's scary because there are thieves around. But we try by all means at least to work, but still you cannot work in the night, because working in the night and working during the day, they are two different things. So load shedding has affected our business a lot. No, that's a welcome move, if at all that will come to fruition, because we've been hearing these pronouncements here and there, and we've been expecting the load shedding to come to an end. So this, if his word will come to pass, then we'll appreciate that.
It doesn't affect me. We don't have load shedding. The only people that have load shedding are the ones that are in New Helen, Old Helen Counter, sorry.
For S24, this is Esnat Lungu.
Right, that is all we had for you in today's business news. Please be safe this weekend. Tal will be back with more news after the break.
Voting is the act of choosing someone or something in an election, and in this particular case, a political candidate. In a democratic country like Zambia, voting is essential. What that means is that we all have the power to choose freely who will rule our country and who will not. Given that choice, it is imperative for us to make informed decisions because what we decide, we have to live with.
Please, no!
The voting process is quite easy to understand, so let's get right into it. After registering as a voter and collecting your voter's card, you will have to wait until the polling day to cast your vote. In this time of waiting, you can take time to get more acquainted with the aspiring candidates so that you're able to make an informed decision come polling day. On polling day, when you get to the polling station, you will undergo screening. This is done to make sure that the people voting are eligible voters. The polling officers will check your NRC and voter's card. They will also do a security check just to ensure that you only have what you need at the voting booth. So before you get to the voting booth, you will be given your ballot papers listing the candidates you can vote for, and you will proceed to the voting booth. Always ensure you read the instructions carefully in order to not make any mistakes. Thereafter, complete your ballot paper by selecting your preferred candidate. Do not for any reason write anything else on your ballot paper, as this may nullify your vote. Your thumbnail will be inked with a semi-permanent dye just so you cannot be allowed to vote again anywhere else other than the place you voted. Right after the voting is done and the polling station is closed, the ballot papers are all screened to make sure they've been filled in correctly. The ones that are not are set aside as rejected ballots and do not count as votes. This is why it is important to follow all the instructions and fill in your ballot paper carefully. As the ballots are counted, a report is given for each district and province. After all the results are compiled, the returning officer then gives a comprehensive report for the nation, revealing the victor for that election. The victorious runner for that election is then sworn in and named president. Each one of us gets one vote. Let's make it count.
If he has the right, Doc, to talk about the party that way, then I'm beginning to wonder.
He doesn't have, yeah, but many people talk. KPF talks about party business. It tells them.
We're talking about your party.
No.
There's a cartel somewhere that has just plotted against the head of state and the PF government. And the whole idea is, look, let's just be calling them corrupt. They'll just be calling you corrupt.
On national TV, have to allow on national TV,
I was quiet when you were speaking. Let me speak.
Please.
Welcome back. In his address to Parliament, the head of state also announced the reopening of schools on the 14th of September 2020 under the new normal. He further called on all relevant stakeholders to ensure that pupils and students work together in ensuring that learners recover the time lost during the closure of schools. Let's quickly speak to Zambia National Union of Teachers, ZANUT spokesperson, for a comment on the reopening of schools. Good evening, Mr. Kasaka.
Good evening, thank you.
All right, so what's your reaction to the president's decision to reopen all schools on the 14th of September, which is next week, Monday?
Thank you very much. In fact, that's a decision that most people have been longing. And apparently, even us as a union, at some point, we started agitating that schools needed to reopen, because we have seen from what has been happening concerning those ones that are already in school. Those that are in school, we have seen that even the infection rate concerning the COVID-19 hasn't been so much. We can't even place it on record that it has been so extensive for them. So learning from those experiences, we can easily say that schools can also reopen for the other classes that were not learning. And also, if you got the president's speech, he stated clearly that the ramifications for schools remaining closed were too ghastly. One, they were ghastly on the curriculum itself. It means we are going to disturb the progression, the children that are supposed to move into the next grades, because there were these people that were going to be stuck in these grades. Like, for instance, the grade 7s, when they write the exams and pass, they will find that the grade 8s will not progress and move. So they cannot also move into grade 8. So it was going to jam the system. And also you saw that the ramifications for some of the children, like the girl children, they started becoming pregnant. We had a situation where the boy children also started indulging in issues of drugs and those other things. So the best thing that we were also agitating for is that schools needed to reopen, so that at least we can have a bit of sanity in terms of the way our children started behaving.
Mr. Kasaka,
otherwise we will have
Mr. Kasaka, but are schools ready and well equipped to handle all grades?
They might not be ready, but what I know is that we need to structure a timetable in such a way that grades begin to exchange each other. Because you see, on issues of washing their hands every time, schools are ready. On issues of masking, schools are ready. But we have a problem on issues of social distance, because, you know, in our classrooms, we have put desks 1 meter apart. And now, if we put desks 1 meter apart, it means in each class there are 15 desks, and therefore there will be only about 15 students in each class. So if we are to say a class of grade 8 children that are 45, these have been staggered around 3 classes. So if there are 3 classes that are going to be used, then we might not have space for the other students that were supposed to be in another class. So what it is that when schools reopen, they will structure the timetable in such a way that when these learn, they knock off, others come and take up those spaces, and so on. So it's manageable, and I think it's something that we can still go around it as people that are in the education sector.
All right, so the president called on stakeholders to work on some sort of a recovery plan for pupils to recover the time lost during the closure of schools. What's your advice to government in this regard? What is the best way to go about it?
The best way to go about it is that we needed to come up with simplified and very short topics that we need to teach in each and every subject. So what we have to do is we need to summarize the topics that we teach to our children. There are some topics that we teach to our children that drag on, even when they drag on for a long time, even when children can just understand the concepts from the first time that you teach them. So we shouldn't drag those topics. So we should ensure that we bring these topics, make them short, and then ensure that children at least learn something on those topics and so on. There was another school of thought where people were saying, maybe we need to combine the topics. Those topics that come twice, you learn them in grade 8, you learn them in grade 9. You need to bring those topics, you cut them, you put them together. That's when you can you can try to bring these things so that the children can learn them at one time.
Your word to parents who don't seem to be ready to allow their children to return to school due to the global pandemic.
The parents are not ready?
I'm saying, what's your word to those parents who don't feel like they want to allow their children to go back to school due to COVID-19?
What I can simply state is that the school places have been safe places. Even the children that have been going to school this time around, those children have been very safe, and no one, as we can say, has died of COVID, or we don't have serious cases from schools where children contracted COVID. So school places are always very safe. We can just urge the parents that they need to send their children to school when schools reopen on the dates that the president cited. So between 14th and 28th, let the children report in their good numbers back into the schools. Schools are safe places, and teachers we've encouraged our teachers to ensure that they practice all those measures that have been put in place by Minister of Health.
All right, thank you so much for your time.
Much obliged.
Today commemorates 19 years since the Twin Towers in New York came down in a terrorist attack by Al-Qaeda that left 2,977 people dead and many more injured with lifelong medical conditions. Americans and people from around the world have been paying tribute to those lost and the first responders who rushed to the sites to rescue those trapped in the towers.
Told one of the other foremen that the Pentagon had just been bombed. So, at that time we didn't have phone, so I remember all day long I was kind of wondering, like, gee, what's that about? It sounds serious, and then when I got back to my apartment later that day, it was all over the news, it's buildings falling, people, the firemen rushing in, taking bodies out. And then, I remember, it was just real surreal, I don't know how else to describe it. It was now, as far as my decision to join the military, I wouldn't say I joined because of in response to 9/11 direct, and might have had a little bit to do with it. As far as I knew that going into the military meant that I might be going to war, or I might not just do a 4-year deal where I deploy to Europe or something like that. So it played into my decision. And then your other question was about how I think the war on terror is going. I think, right now it's a stalemate, and it depends on, I think, we've been at it too long, so objectives keep changing. There's no clear, there's no clear goal as far as what we should do. I wish I had, an answer for that, but, it is disheartening to see that we're still over there after 19 years,
This past week, the world saw the promising COVID vaccination trials being conducted out of Oxford University, UK, in collaboration with the pharmaceutical company AstraZeneca, being halted after a suspected adverse event in a person who received the vaccine in the United Kingdom. As we continue waiting for COVID prevention medicine, countries like Senegal and New Zealand have managed to have kept the infection of the coronavirus to the smallest level. We're joined by Dr. Angelique Kotsia, the chairperson of SAMA, to gain more insight. Good evening, Dr. Angelique.
Good evening, and a good evening to all the listeners out there.
Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure to be on your program.
Wonderful. So getting straight into it, the COVID-19 Global Response Index, which tracks countries' responses to the coronavirus, places Senegal in second place after New Zealand worldwide. What has Senegal done differently from most countries in the world?
Thank you. I think it's first of all important just to understand that the Global COVID Response Index includes only 36 countries, many of them not from Africa. That's the first thing. And then it covers an initial set, as I've said, of 36 countries, including some of the G20 nations, as well as other several developing and middle-income countries that experts and epidemiologists have identified as having a notable experiences with respect to COVID-19. Now, it's also important to understand that this index includes a number of aspects of countries' response to COVID and converts this then into a relative score to come up with a global index of performance, considering many factors. And here it is important to understand that they look at the pre-COVID conditions, such as your debt to GDP ratio, your infant mortality rate, your hospital beds per 100,000 people, your Gini coefficients measuring inequality, and your health access and quality. That is the first part, that's the pre-COVID conditions. And then if you look at the COVID-19, the public health directives, and I think here is where Senegal also got it right, is they look at what was the stay-at-home orders, the school closing policy, the public gathering restrictions, which is also very important. Then, as we all know, the cancellation of public events, and your testing policy and rates per 1,000 people, and then also your emergency healthcare that you spend per capita, your travel restrictions, and your contact tracing. And they also look at a financial response, so which is a stimulus package as a rate of your GDP, your income support, your debt forbearance, and then your public communications, and then your current or history in your own country of your COVID-19 status. So, as you correctly said, New Zealand got it right. They have a score on all of this. They score 100%. South Africa only scored a 65%, and we were pulled down mainly by our financial responses, which was only 48. And although our public health response also didn't score that well, it was 66. But we got from South Africa 100% for fact-based communication. And I think we can all agree that there's a lot of mistakes that has been made. And the government also had tried to keep it factual, especially on the fact-based communication. And as you again correctly said, Senegal is the top African country, and they scored 89.3%. And this is mostly supported by the public communications, especially the IT fact-based communication, that was 100%, and the public health responses, that was 95%. So they look at quite a few indicators to come up with this.
All right, let's talk about AstraZeneca and how they halted its COVID vaccine trials. Is there any news as to what the adverse effect is?
No, we haven't heard what the adverse reaction was of that patient. But remember, this is now in phase 3. Phase 3 is where you now use your vaccine onto healthy people, and but you also use, you don't know whether this patient is getting the real vaccine or a placebo. Normally, these trials carry on for at least a year up till, and it can even be longer. So it is difficult to say what that specific adverse reaction was, but I think it was severely enough for us all to take notice that there was such an incident. But in this phase of the vaccine trial, it is being expected that you will get some adverse reactions.
All right, so people are already wary of vaccine trials. How can people be reassured of the efficacy of a vaccine?
Well, it's very difficult. You have to make sure that your institution that is part of these trials, South Africa, I know for a fact, is part of these trials, that they follow the protocol. There's quite strict protocols coming from the World Health Organization. And that is the protocols. You need to adhere to that. If we look at and I think we have spoken about this before, if we look at what is happening in Russia, they haven't even entered phase 3 properly. They only started, I think, end of June, beginning of July, and they are already say they are in phase 3 and their vaccine is ready to be launched. I will be very skeptical to use that type of vaccine. Sorry, I didn't hear you.
I'm saying thank you so much for your time with us. Have a good evening.
You too. Bye.
In more news, the head of the 10 family members who were allegedly petrol-bombed on Tuesday evening in Lusaka's Matero Township is appealing to government to pay him his retirement package in order for him to alleviate his family from the misery of its loss. Peter Kaliata, a former civil servant at Ministry of Finance who escaped death together with his wife and 3 grandchildren, is still nursing injuries in hospital, who is also unemployed and has no money to buy medication for himself and his family after suffering severe wounds. Mr. Kaliata's wife and 3 grandchildren are still admitted at Chingwere Level 1 Hospital at the University Teaching Hospitals, respectively. Tito Kalama now records.
Still nursing burn wounds after his house was petrol-bombed on Tuesday night. Kaliata, whose wife and 3 of his grandchildren are still nursing life-threatening wounds, is appealing to government to pay him his pension dues.
Because in munyumba muja nilipero kawani ngwe konsa kandala kamene tunai kati bakawodele kutoa chita konsa kana onongeka.
He has lost almost all his entire life's possessions. He has a word for the people that were after his life and that of his family.
Sinizi waloni ndani, waloni jealous ya bwanji, waloni chani. Chamena ine mwina pala nikaliwodiabwa. Nikaliwodiabwa sinizi wa muntu wame anachita. So if you know na kongola ya muntu. It's better semana nikula ku Simon kukoti. Not kuononga family yanga so.
What really happened on the fateful night of Tuesday?
Yapwanyika window mwisho. So ni sekule do nuwa chape mulilo wa yaka.
Sekula do kuchoka kuti.
Bedroom kwanga manje. Ati niangani chame chilila ku sitting room. Nuwa chape mulilo wa yaka na petrol inunka.
He narrowly escaped death together with his wife through a tiny window as the fire had engulfed the entire sitting room and blocked access to his grandchildren's bedroom. He had to save his grandchildren. Together with good Samaritans, they managed to break the main door.
Mulilo toa uzime maina manepas wache ndiye kupwanya toe. Mzaiwa na toa kuje niyo pwanyiwa. Ndiye kuyamba kuchosa manje bana. Nishibonsi wafente.
Tito Kalama, S24.
In sports news, many sports faculties in Zambia, including hockey, have taken advantage of the reopening of the Olympic Youth Development Center with strict adherence to health measures and are beginning to train on Monday, 14th of September 2020. Speaking to S24 Sports, OIDC Director Dr. Frederick Chitangala says the center will resume the Tailings Youth Sports Challenge that will engage young, talented athletes in beach volleyball, netball, taekwondo, and hockey. Swimming will not resume as they are not yet clear on how to navigate it amidst COVID-19. The center will operate under strict rules focusing on social distancing, wearing of masks, and sanitizing.
I think that in terms of expectation, we are going to continue with the same sports that we intended to start with at the beginning of the year. and that is hockey, taekwondo only kata, no contact, and then netball and beach volleyball. We are not going to resume swimming because we are not yet clear on how safe sharing water is, even though we know that it could be actually safe because of the chlorine put in the water. But in terms of other things, considering that we are in the COVID pandemic era, all athletes who walk into OIDC, even non-athletes, have to wash their hands on entrance. They have to take their temperatures. And also, when they go to their specific fields, they'll find hand washing basins there. And we expect them to social distance if they are not on the field. Okay? And then every athlete will have to walk in with them. We will not allow spectators, except those athletes who are waiting to play. And if they are waiting to play, they should not break the social distancing rule.
Also trending in the sports world today, US-based Zambian Solomon Musonda has been recognized as an inventor by the United States of America Patent and Trademark Office for designing the Olympics automated pacing device for swimmers. In an article written by Harrison Musonda, Solomon is an electrical engineer from Saginaw Valley State University in Michigan and also holds an ACCA certification from ZICAS in Lusaka, Zambia. Currently, he is working on 5 designs of motor vehicles which fall under his watch. That's all we had on this evening's bulletin. Here's a recap of the headlines. Zambia is better than it was, says President Lungu. Global COVID response and way forward. Alcohol enthusiasts dancing to partial reopening of bars. Petrol-bombed family struggling to quench 2 fires. And in sports, OIDC Open under strict measures. Remember, S24 is your first and only Zambian 24-hour news channel that continues to be at the source of your story. Thank you for watching. Good evening.
Live from Lusaka, Zambia, this is S24 News.